In 2002, as a sophomore in high school, I won the main state championship in Lincoln Douglas debate. Now, I admit I won this title using somewhat dubious methods, namely that I had spent the entire year faking a British accent in order to squeeze or scam more speaker points out of my judges. This had actually been remarkably effective until I made the critical error of inviting my mom along to a tournament, and she blew my cover while in the judges' lounge. But this small setback aside couldn't slow my roll. So in June of 2002, my dad and I flew down to Charlotte, North Carolina for the national debate tournament. So the day before the tournament began, Dad and I went to scout out the school where it was going to be held. Now, I was brimming with like radioactive levels of insufferable high school debater ego when I saw it. A little flyer hanging on a classroom door advertising a haunted house. Now we're talking like a little 8.5 by 11-inch white sheet of paper with an address beneath a little clip art ghost, right? So I show it to my dad. I say, "What's this? A debate-themed haunted house? What could that possibly be? The ghost of John Locke chasing you down the hallways going, 'Ooh, you violated the social contract.' Ah." Well, Dad, sharing my keen sense of humor, jumped right in, being like, "You've mismanaged your prep time." Oh, how we laughed, Dad and I, about the kaleidoscopic stupidities of a debate-themed haunted house. Well, we had no other plans in Charlotte that afternoon, so we decided, well, why not go and check it out ourselves? The first red flag was that it took us about an hour to get there. The second red flag was that the address didn't lead us to the suburban home of some debate nerd. It was a warehouse. And the gentleman inside informed us that this was not a debate haunted house. This was the North Carolina's largest distributor of Halloween supplies, who had spent the past several years creating a massive indoor haunted experience, which they were now doing like run-throughs of to test all of the sets and the scare mechanics well in advance of the Halloween season. Oh boy. I historically have not done well with haunted houses, but I've always wanted to be the type of person that did. You know, the type of person that can laugh in the face of a snarling zombie or who can shriek with delight while being chased by, a maniac wielding a chainsaw. But as I stood on the threshold of 15,000 square feet of professionally curated immersive horror, my self-confidence began to feel a bit like my British accent, in that it was a mildly effective yet quite flimsy tool or front without really much of an exit plan. But instead of looking around at the literal warehouse full of hyper-realistic Halloween masks and saying, not today. Instead, Dad and I said, we already drove an hour here, so hey, what the hell? How bad could it really be? Now, as a storyteller, I believe that haunted houses are like dreams, and that the truth of them can only be really experienced in, embodied knowledge and in sensations and in these subconscious connections that can never really be pinned down into description. Now, my dad, who's here in our Zoom audience tonight, is probably rolling his eyes and saying, "Sara, you couldn't possibly even try to describe that immersive horror experience because you spent most of it in a strange walking fetal position while clinging to the back of my shirt like a little baby monkey." And all right, fine. So I didn't enjoy being trapped in a dark room with a bunch of 3-foot tall little glow-in-the-dark aliens that somehow were able to effortlessly chase down the audience member that was terrified and trying to evade them. So I didn't like it. Sue me. But what was worse, the worst thing about that haunted house wasn't those horrid little aliens, and it wasn't this post-apocalyptic streetscape with like radioactive green goo and exploding manholes. It wasn't even the limb-strewn surgical theater. No, the worst thing about that haunted house was the 11-year-old child whose family had also come to the haunted house after being lured there by another innocuous flyer. This little devil found my terror just absolutely delightful. He kept laughing at all of my perfectly reasonable shrieks of terror. Now, when we got to the halfway point of the haunted house, there was like a break room. And I declared, I'm having a great time. I'm gonna, however, skip the second half of the haunted house. I'm not scared. It's just that I have this really important debate tournament tomorrow, and I want to really get back to preparing for that. Normally, I'd be really into this. I'm having again a great time, but today is just not it. But then I saw the smirk on that prepubescent little devil's face as he thought that I was about to wimp out, and I said, "You know what? I take it back. I'm going to keep going through this haunted house because I cannot wait to see what its hellish corridors contain. And there I went. So what lay ahead towards the end was like a very narrow room that was made out to look like a 1950s beauty salon, right? And hanging from this were several bodies wrapped in blood streak plastic. They were like hanging from the ceiling by their ankles. And it was a very narrow room, not a lot of space to maneuver. So I didn't love it. But I resolved to just walk briskly and with purpose through the room and get around the first one. And then, okay, here comes the second one. And there's just one more, and I'm free. And this kid pops out from the ground screaming at me right at the same moment that the body hanging from the ceiling begins to jerk back and forth, hitting me in the shoulder. Did I scream at a pitch that is audible only to dogs? Yeah, I might have. I'm not ashamed of that. Did I run through the rest of the haunted house? And was I a very quiet girl on the entire car ride back to the hotel? Yeah, maybe so. A lot of people are. I was eliminated from the debate competition after 2 days, probably due to the extreme psychological duress of this experience, and I returned to Maine a humble woman. The moral of the story, kids, is to do your research. Do your research for your debate, so that you don't have to fake a bad British accent in order to succeed. But most importantly, do your research, even minimal amounts of research, before taking the drive all the way out to that haunted house. Thank you very much.